Okay, in this video we're going to talk about how to use PivotTable to analyze data sets in Excel. So let's start with a relatively simple example. Here we have a small data set that contains sales records. So we have the sales reps' names and also the date on which the sales are made. And then we have the sales amount, right? So these are dollar amount. One thing we would like to do is to summarize the total sales for each sales rep. Okay, and also we would like to figure out their maximum sale, the maximum sale they have made, and also the minimum sale they have made. So we have learned how to do that using different approaches. For example, if you try to use, if you want to calculate the total sales, you can either use the if function together with the array formula, or you can use the sum if. Right, so you can take a look at the array formula exercise we did before. So to do this using PivotTable, we're going to first select your data. Okay, you can just point anywhere in your data set and insert PivotTable. So first you can see that PivotTable will recognize the data range. You want to double check to make sure this is indeed what you want. And also you need to figure out you need to pick the location for the pivot table you want to generate, right? So if you say new worksheet, then Excel will generate a new worksheet and put your pivot table there. If you want to put your pivot table in an existing location, then you should say existing worksheet, and the location just pick somewhere. This is going to be the upper left corner of your pivot table. So and everything's right, so click OK, and this is going to be your pivot table, right? So in your pivot table, because if we want to summarize the sales by names, then each row would be a name, right? So I'm going to put the names, employee names, in rows. Now you can see that pivot table will figure out there are 4 distinct names in your data set, right? So it won't show repeated records. And we would like to summarize their sales, so I'm going to drag sales into values. So automatically, PivotTable will choose, show the sum of the sales for each sales rep. Right? So let me summarize the process here a little bit. So step 1, so would be select data. So basically, you just need to point your cursor somewhere in the data set. Step 2, insert pivot table. Right? And the next step, you need to decide what you want to do with the pivot table, right? Exactly along which dimension you want to summarize your data. Right? After you make that decision, all you need to do is to go to that pivot table fields menu. Just drag and drop in pivot table fields. So there you get your pivot table thing. Okay, after you get your pivot table, you can notice the column title. Right now it just says row labels, so you may not like the title here because it should say employee or it should say sales rep, right? That's the column title. So there are 2 ways to handle this. Let me show you both ways. I can make a copy of the table. Right. So one way is to go to Pivot Table Tools, Design, and choose Report Layout. And you can choose either the outline form or tabular form. After you choose that form, then the name will update to reflect the original column name. So this is probably what you want. Right. And if you want to change the second column name here, you can just double click on that and change the name here. So that'll be, let's say you want to change that to total sales, maybe. Okay, so now you can change your name this way. Of course, another way, probably easier way, is to just double click here and type your names. And here you still have to do the use this menu to change the name. Okay. So there are 2 different ways. One is to use the design, report layout, and pick one of these form. Okay, so that will automatically change the name, or you can just go in there and type the name you want. Okay. So for you can change column names. Okay. And another thing you may want to do is to format the numbers in here, because these are sales. You probably want to put a $ in front of these numbers. So to do that, you can just right click on any of these number and go to number format and pick, for example, currency format, if that's what you're looking for. And because I don't have decimals here, I'm going to remove decimals for now. Okay. So this way it will change all the numbers, the format of all the numbers here. Right? So you can change number format. There's something else you can do. Okay, so these are by default. If you drag numbers, okay, for example, if you drag sales into the value field, because sales are numbers, so by default, PivotTable will calculate the sum for each employee, right? So if you want to calculate, for example, the maximum sales for each employee or the minimum sales for each employee, and then what you need to do is to, let me move this to the right so it doesn't block me. What you need to do is to drag sales to values again, and then again. Okay. So like I said, by default, the PivotTable will always calculate the sum. So these three columns are the same now. If I want to calculate the maximum sale, then all I need to do is to left click on this sum on this column here, and then click on value field setting. Okay. So PivotTable allows you to do this 11 calculations, right? So if you want, for example, the max, then that's going to be the maximum sale. Just choose max and click OK. So this will be the maximum sale that Kate has made, right, in this data. Same thing for the last column. Let's say I want to do minimum sale, so I just click on that, left click, and go to value field settings, and it's going to be minimum sales. Right, choose mean. And of course, you can also choose these other functions too. Let's see. Okay, so count is basically the number of sales that this sales rep has made, right, according to this data. Okay. So for the exam purpose, I'm going to ask you to know the top 5. Okay, the top 5 functions here. Choose the function top 5 in the list. Okay. And of course, if you like, you can also change the title here to maximum sales, minimum sales. Change the format, do number format, currency, okay. Number format, currency. Okay. So now you have a nice pivot table. So PivotTable also allows you to insert a figure according to this table. For example, if you want to generate a chart that shows people what's the total sales for each representative, then all you need to do is to select the pivot table and click on pivot table tools, analyze, and then go to pivot chart. So the pivot chart tool will suggest different chart types. For example, this is a bar chart, and they also have line chart, a pie chart, and so forth. And you just pick the type that you need. For example, here, let's say we need the column, the bar chart. So this is going to be how the chart is going to look like. So we click OK. So the pivot table will generate the chart for us automatically, right? The blue bar is the total sales made by each rep, and the orange one is the maximum sales made by each rep, right? So you also have the minimum sales. So it's pretty clear in this picture, right? So you can generate a chart if you want to. Insert pivot chart if needed. The other thing about a pivot table to pay attention to is that if you change the numbers in your original data set, then the pivot table will not update automatically, right? So for example, if you change this last number, sales number for Kate, to 2,500, right? It goes up from 500 to 2,500. So you'd think Kate's total sales should go up by 2,000, right? So this one should become 3,700, right? 3,700. But if you just enter this, then none of this number will change. So to change that, you need to go to your pivot table and right-click somewhere and click refresh. Right? You can see after you refresh your pivot table, this number will change. Right? So the other interesting thing you notice about pivot table is that if you just generate, keep inserting different pivot tables, right, based on the same data set, then all these pivot tables are going to be linked together. Meaning, when you when you refresh one of the tables, all these other tables will also be refreshed. Right? So basically, what happens here is that Excel will generate a copy of this data set and use that copy to produce all these tables. So when you update one copy, all copies are updated. So there are ways for you to generate separate copies for data so that these pivot tables do not update all together, but here we're not going to talk about that. Okay, so that's number 8. So pivot table do not update automatically, need to refresh. And the other thing that pivot table doesn't do is that if you use a normal range like this as your data source, then when you add new data entries into the range, for example, if I add May 2018 for Mike, I add a new sales for Mike, then even if you refresh your table, it won't show up at all, this new entry, right? So pivot table won't include this new entry like this. So if you want pivot table to include the new entries, then the only way to do that is to select the table and insert table. Okay. So select your range and go to insert select table. So you transform your range into a table. Okay. So in this case, when you enter a new entry here, then that new entry is automatically included in your table. If I insert a pivot table based on this new table format, okay. Say I insert a new table here. I'm going to quickly drag employee and the sales. Okay. So now I have a summary of my total sales based on employee. Okay, so now let me give this a new entry. Mary, let's say in May 2018, she has a sale of 20,000, right? And if you come here, you can see right now the number for Mary is not updated yet. It's still 3,000 total sales. But if I do refresh, you can see after this is automatically updated. Right? So if your data source is a table, then it will automatically include any new entry. So that's a convenient. Finally, if you don't like how your table looks like, then you can also choose your own format for your pivot table. You can just go to PivotTable 2, Design, And here you have many formats to choose from, right? For example, let's say if you choose this format, then your table is going to look like this. Right? If you choose this format, it looks different. If you don't like any of this formats, then you can just go down to the bottom here. You can define your own pivot table style, right? For example, if you want your header row, okay, to look different, then you can format your header row and choose the font you like, choose the font color, and choose the border type, and so forth, right? So here I'm just going to leave that to you. Okay, so we have covered some basics for pivot table. Now let's go to a slightly bigger data set to use pivot table to summarize the information in here and learn something, also some new features about pivot table, right? So here you have some sales record for a toy company, right? So we know the date when the sales were made, even the time, and the company that made the toy, and the toy name, and so forth. So let's go to, first of all, let's click on this table and insert pivot table. Location is going to be, let's put my first table here. Click OK. Right. So I would like to summarize my sales by year and month. So I want to see my total sales per year, per month. So here, as you can see, in the original data set, we only have date. We don't really have a separate column for year or month, right? But that's not going to be a problem as long as you drag your date into row. As you can see, Excel will automatically calculate the year and quarters, right? So actually, it's by default summarized by year and quarter. And if I drag my, let's say, revenue, then I can see the total sales made per year and per quarter. If you want to see, instead of per quarter, you want to see the total sales per month, then what you need to do is, the easiest way is probably to go to this column and right click and go to group. Okay. Group is an important function here. So you can see right now it's grouped by year, quarters, and months, right? So I don't need the quarters, so I can just uncheck quarters. So now it's going to be grouped by year and month. So I'll click OK. You can see this. Now I know my total sales per, in 2010, January, February, and so forth. Right? Or maybe you just want to see the total sales for each calendar month, right? So you don't want to break it down into different years. So you want to see what was my total sales in January, what's my total sales in February, right? Including all years. If you want to do that, you can just go to group and uncheck years. Okay, now you can see this is going to be your sales in January, total sales in February, including all years, right? So you can select different ways to group your dates. So let me go back to group and also select years. Okay. Another useful thing that you may want to do is, right now you have this a breakdown of sales into 12 months, right? But you might still want to see the total for each year. Right now it's not showing the total sales for each year, right? It's only showing the total sales for all 3 years, but not each year. So if you want to see also the total sales for each year, then you can just click on this and go to Pivot Table Design, and here you have this icon here called Subtotals. You can just click on Subtotals. Let's say we want to show subtotal at the bottom of each group. Click on that. Now you can see you have the total sales for each subgroup. Here a subgroup is a year. Right, so that can be useful. So let me summarize a little bit. You should know how to group your dates by months, maybe quarter, maybe years. Okay. Alright, let's look at another example here. I would like to here I would like to summarize my revenue by weekday, and then I would like to add a toy company name as a filter. Okay, so I want to see what was my total sales on all Mondays or on all Tuesdays and so forth. So this shows some limitation of what PivotTable can do, because PivotTable can only provide grouping by months or quarters, so it won't be able to automatically group the days by weekdays, right? So if you want to do that, you have to create something by yourself, right? So here, let's see how we do that. In Excel, we have a function called weekday, right? So what this function does is it will take a date and then tell you which weekday it is, right? So the first input here is going to be the date that you want to transform. Then there's a second input here. The second input is going to be a number that's between 1 and 17. So this is kind of a code. So if you choose 1 for the second input, then the result, if the result is number 1, that means it's a Sunday. If the result is 7, that means it's a Saturday. Right? So let's try that. If I choose 1, then the result is 5, right? So let's see what does 5 mean. So because I choose 1, 1 is Sunday, right? So 2 is Monday. I think 5 would be a Thursday, right? So I think this is kind of a little awkward for me. So I'm gonna choose number 2 here, because if I choose number 2, then 1 is Monday, 2 is Tuesday. I think that's easier for me to read. So I'm gonna choose 2 here. Okay. So now 4. Based on this coding method, 4 would be a Thursday. Right? So you can drag it down to. So if you want to show the actual Thursday here instead of number 4, you can use choose function in Excel to transform. So it's going to be S2, and so basically choose function start with a number and say, let's say this is number 4, and then it's going to pick the 4th element from a list here, right? So our elements here are going to be the names of weekdays, right? So the first one is going to be Monday. That's the first element in our list, and then you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So because now S2 is 4, so we're picking the 4th element, that's a Thursday. That's exactly what we want. And also we can get rid of this column. So here, instead of doing S2, instead of referring to this, we can just copy the formula here. Just come here and do Control-C, escape, go here and replace this reference with the formula. Okay. So now we can get rid of this column here. So let's say this is a weekday column. Double click. Okay. Okay, so this is going to be kind of our helper column here, because PivotTable doesn't directly translate days into weekdays, so we have to do it by ourselves. But that's okay, that's not too bad. Okay, so after you do that, okay, let's first of all insert PivotTable location. Let's put it somewhere here. So, because I'm trying to summarize by weekday, so each row is going to be a weekday. So you can see here we have 7 weekdays, and I'm going to choose revenue here. So now we have a summary of revenue by weekdays, right? And also, it's often the case that we would like to break down our sales along more than one dimensions, right? For example, we want to see our sales by weekdays, maybe also by toy companies, right? So we want to do a two-dimensional analysis. And there are several ways to add dimensions to your analysis, right? Let me first introduce one way is to do a two-way table. Right now it's basically a one-way table, right? So I'm going to add columns to you. So each column here is going to be a toy company's name, right? So I'm going to drag toy company into columns. So now you can see that it breaks down the sales of this company by weekday and by toy company. So that's one way to do it. And of course, because this is pivot table, you do not have to put the toy company names as column names, right? You can also add row names using toy company names. For example, I can just pivot my pivot table by dragging this company name from columns to rows. So I drag from columns to rows. Now you can see, again, it's a two-way breakdown, except right now everything is as a row, right? So it's a Sunday for each company and Monday for each company. So you can drag them around however you want, but you get the same breakdown, just different presentations. Right? And another way, instead of adding another dimension in the table, to study the sales from each toy company, I can, first of all, let me uncheck toy company to recover this table, right? So without adding an extra dimension inside my table, I can add a filter here. I can drag my toy company into filter. You can see after I drag my toy company into the filters field, I have this extra row here. And there's a drop-down menu. If I click on this drop-down menu, it allows me to select one of these toy companies, right? So right now it says all, meaning both companies are selected. But if I just select one of them and click OK, then these will be the same, the sales for the toys made by Duplo, right? If I click on Lego, then these are the sales for the toys made by Lego. So that's one way to break it down. And another way is to, so let me first drag this back there, so I don't have toy company anymore. Another way is to insert a slicer. If I insert a slicer, then say I want a toy company as my slicer, then I click OK. So I have this little menu here. So right now both companies are selected. If I just want to select one of them, I can just click on one of them, and then these sales are for this company, right? So these sales are for this company. Or I can, if you want to select the multiple items, then select one of them and press Control, and then select another one. This way you can select multiple items. Okay. And what's nice about this slicer is that they allow you to insert multiple slicers. For example, I can go to Analyze and insert a slicer again. But this time, instead of doing toy companies, I can do toy names. Right. So now I have another slicer. So in your analysis, you can combine these two slicers. For example, if I want to see all the sales for Duplo's toys, right? So I can first at this level, click on Duplo, right? And from this second menu, you can see that only 3 toys are made by Duplo. All these other toys are made by Lego. So only now you can only choose one of these 3. Okay? So I say I want to pick the placement made by Duplo. So these will be the sales for this particular toy made by Duplo. Right? So that's kind of convenient. Okay, now let me delete these slicers. Okay. So the other thing I want to say about this filter is that I forgot to say one thing about the filters. Let's say I want to add a toy company as a filter. Now I have this. You can pick one of this company or both of the companies, right? So if you pick one of this company, it shows, for example, you pick Lego, it shows the result by Lego. And if you want to pick Duplo, and it shows result by Duplo, right? So sometimes you might have many choices here, and each of these choices will generate a separate report. So the question is, what if you want to show all these reports together, right? So without actually inserting many pivot tables, there's an easy way for you to show these reports together. And what you can do is that, first of all, you select the companies where you want to make report for, right? So here, because we only have 2 companies, so I'm going to select both of them, right? And then you click here, click on this pivot table, go to Pivot Table Tools, Analyze, and go to this upper left corner. Click on this Options and choose Show Report Filter Pages. Right? If you choose that, then they will ask you, are you trying to show different reports for different companies? And you click OK. You can see after you click that, there will be 2 more spreadsheets showing up, right? So one for Duplo, the other for Lego, right? So this way you don't have to manually generate different tables. As long as you do show report filter pages, then Excel will automatically generate a separate report for each of the company that you choose. So now you have one report for Duplo, one report for Lego. So that's a convenient feature to know. So to summarize, to add new dimension to your analysis, I think we have at least 3 different approaches. One is to add a new row or column in your table. Another is to use filters. And then you can also use slicers, right? So I think they have different benefits, as you saw in our example. Depends on which one you prefer. Okay, finally, let me show you one more example. So I'm going to move on to the second data set here, and I'll insert. This is again some kind of sales record. So it has the sales rep's name and also the region that they operate in, and also the product and so forth. So we are going to select the data, insert a pivot table, choose location. Let me put the result here. I'm going to work on this one. Click OK. Here I would like to summarize my sales by region first and then sales rep. So I'm going to drag region first and sales rep second level, and I'm going to drag my revenue here. So that tells me my the sales made by each sales rep, right? The total sales. One thing here we can do is that, for example, if I want to figure out who's my top salespeople in each region, then I can sort this by. There are actually 2 ways to do that, right? One way is to just sort this data so that the people with the highest sale are on top. So that's easy for you to see, right? So let's see how we do sorting. So click on the data, go to the data tab here, and sort. Okay, so we want to go. We want the best sales on top, so large to small. Click OK. So then automatically, they will show you what's the total sales. What's the highest sales for each rep, right? So automatically they will rank the salespeople according to their sales. So it's going to be your top sales in the East region, this is going to be your top sales in the Midwest region, and so forth. Okay. Another way to understand the ranking is to click on this value, okay, and right click, and then click on Show Value As. Okay. So here you can see we have a rank smallest to largest. Right? So let's rank largest to smallest. And then we're going to rank sales rep. So that's another way. So that this number tells you that this sales rep has the number 1 sales, and this sales rep has the number 2 sales, and so forth. Right? So that's another way to see ranks. So again, go here and show value as, rank from largest to smallest. Right? That's one way to show it. So let me go back to the original no calculation format. So that's going to be still the raw sales. Another useful analysis is probably to check how these sales reps have performed over time, right? So here we have 2 years of record. So I'm going to break this down into 2 years by introducing a new column. So I'm going to do date here, and I will uncheck quarter, and also I'll go here, do grouping. Actually, all I want is years, so I'll uncheck everything else. And if I want to calculate her sales growth from this year to this year, then all I need to do is to go to the table and right click. Then I can do show value as. Actually, I'm going to do different from. Right? So different from, you can either do the difference in dollar term or difference in percentage term. Right? So if I say I want to do difference in dollar term, different from, and then the base field is going to be date, because I want to see how their sales have changed over time. So from one date to another, so a long date. And the base item is going to be previous. So I want to compare this sales to the previous sales, or the sales in the previous year. Click OK. So this shows that this Arturo's sales has been down by 707 from the previous year, right? So Austin's sale has been down by this amount from the previous year, and so forth. Okay. So that's also a useful thing to know. Okay, so let me get rid of that formula here. I'm going to go back to no calculation. It's going to be the original formula. And also I would like to let's uncheck sales rep first. So now I only have a breakdown by region and by year, right? And probably I want to figure out, within 2013, how much of my sale in percentage term come from each region, right? To do that, I can just right click and show value as percentage of, because here I want to see this number as a percentage of the column total in 2013. So I'm going to show value as percentage of column total. So now this tells me that in 2013, 16% of my sales come from East, and 36% come from Midwest, and so forth. And if you have many years and you want to study the trend in terms which region has become more important or which region has become less important, then a useful tool would be to insert, go to analysis and insert a pivot chart. Do something called 100% stacked column, right? So let's choose this one. Okay. So if you choose this one, right now this table doesn't make too much sense, because I want to see the relative importance of each region for my sales. Right now it's not showing that. So that's because our row and the columns are not in the right format that this particular chart is looking for, right? So all we need to do is to switch the order of your date and region. Now you can see we have what we're looking for. So basically this shows you the relative importance of the 4 regions in 2013, and this shows you the relative importance of the 4 regions in 2014. So if you have a long time series, that might help you to understand which region has become more important or less important, right? So here we only have 2 years, so it's not that the trend is not that obvious, but this is something useful to know. Okay, so that's all the analysis we have here. So finally, if I want to take a closer look at for example, the performance of the East region in 2013, right? So right now I only have a number. For example, if I go back to value without calculation, right now all I have is the total sales in dollar amount, right? But I want to see a breakdown of this number. To see the details of this number, all you need to do is to double click on this number. Then you can see that Excel will insert a new worksheet, right? Will insert a new worksheet, and this worksheet will contain all the data points that is related to the East region, and the sales are made in 2013. So this spreadsheet contains all the data that goes into calculating this particular number, right? So you can take a closer look if you want. Okay. So that's all we have for PivotTable.